listening to the Cricket Podcast.
I think it was a disgraceful performance, and I think it should never be permitted to happen again.
That is very good.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Cricket Podcast, where we'll be reviewing the last couple of matches from the IPL. Today we had Sunrisers Hyderabad taking on and losing comfortably to Chennai Super Kings, and yesterday we had a real thriller as Delhi Capitals, Shimron Hetmyer came up just short against Royal Challengers Bangalore. Max, how are you doing? You're a winning fan today. Are you happy?
I'm very happy, Jack. Still very happy. Still top of the world and top of the table. It's a great time to be a CSK fan against all the odds.
And Dan, the good news is that we don't have to talk about KL Rahul today. The bad news is that we are going to have to talk about Sunrisers Hyderabad. But the excellent news is that Royal Challengers Bangalore held on by 1 run yesterday. So the bandana, is that going to be back in action today?
Let's do it. Joint top. I don't believe in net run rate, but so we're top of the league with CSK. We're 6 points ahead of the chasing pack in the race for qualification as well. So this is going up.
That's fantastic. Right, boys. Where do we start? We start with some messages, Max, don't we? What do you want to tell our listeners?
We do. Yes, our listeners should follow us on Twitter and Instagram at the Cricket Pod, and they should also like and subscribe. Like to this video and subscribe to us on YouTube. Click that little bell button to stay in touch with us, and also check out our sponsors, Woodstock Cricket. As you can see, the bag modelled nicely behind me there in the background.
Yeah, you can. I don't know if it modelled nicely is how I'd phrase that, but it is there in the background. Max, another question for you. Have you clicked record? Because we've been having trouble with that on our last few episodes.
Yes, I have clicked record.
Yep, okay, so that's good. That will be better audio quality all round for the people who listen over on Spotify. A couple of other reminders. You should be a cross-format hero, boys. Subscribe on YouTube and then go and subscribe on Spotify. It's all about being a three-dimensional cricket supporter these days, and that will make us our day. And you can join our Patreon or our channel on YouTube for as little as £1 per month if you want to give it to us directly. Or hit us up in the super chat as Vic just has, and we will say thank you to people who super chatted us this week. Shall we start with some cricket first up though, boys?
That's what we're here for.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
So today we'll start with Sunrisers v Chennai Super Kings. First of all, I'm just going to ask a question. What's going on here? Does Sunrisers Hyderabad play about 4 times as many matches as everyone else, or does it just feel like that?
Yeah, it's that classic theory of relativity business, isn't it? Yeah, time just goes on and on and on when Sunrisers are playing.
It does. You could live 4 full lives, I reckon, if you were just watching Sunrisers Hyderabad play cricket back to back. Second of all, here's what's happened in the match. Sunrisers Hyderabad, Warner won the toss and he decided he would bat. So they did bat. Bairstow fell relatively early in the innings, but then they didn't lose another wicket until the 18th over, which sounds like it would be a recipe for a monster score. Unfortunately, David Warner had other ideas as he plodded along at a runner ball to score 57 or 55 or 55 or 57. I think I got my 50s mixed up there. Manish Pandey at the other end was absolutely flying in comparison as he reached 61 with a strike rate over 140. So well done to Manish Pandey for, being better than Dave Warner. Anyway, this curious approach to T20 batting left Sunrisers miles short of a good score before Kane Williamson and checks notes. Kedar Jadhav managed to hit 37 off the last 13 balls of the innings to get them up to 171, which wasn't a total disgrace. In reply, CSK got off to a flyer, reaching 91 for no loss at the halfway point in the innings. And then in the second half, they had another flyer as they won the game with 9 balls to spare, 7 wickets in hand. Faf and Gaikwad doing most of the damage, picking up a 50 each. A comfortable win, Max, for your men in yellow.
Yep, absolutely smashed it. And I think what I enjoyed most about it was after David Warner's obvious struggles, how Gaikwad and Faf just came out, and it was like they just like sort of it was like sweeping up a bit of dust in the corner and being like, "Yeah, no, it's done. Yeah, cheers, boys. Move on." It was imperious, wasn't it?
It was really something. Let's rewind though. I'm glad you're happy, Max. But let's rewind to probably the pivotal innings of the match, played by David Warner. CricViz released one of their stats where they don't actually explain how they've got the number, so it's sort of useless to observers. But they said this innings was worth minus 15.2 runs, apparently, which is the 15th worst out of 9,724 T20 innings they have on record. So, that does tell you it was pretty bad. Vic has already mentioned in the super chat that maybe CSK could have gone for the tactical drop of David Warner. He was batting so bad, and that might have saved them a few runs. Dan, I'm going to let you have first dibs on David Warner. How catastrophically bad was this knock from the Sunrisers captain?
Yeah, it was beyond terrible. I don't know if how many people in the chat were listening to the English commentary we get on Sky Sports, but Pommy and Bangalore said, and that is a fantastic milestone for David Warner when he hit a boundary. And it was his 10,000th T20 run, right? At that point, before he announced it was his 10,000th T20 run, I thought he was going to turn around and go, and he's now above 90 strike rate. it was that bad. I mean, I've got some notes here, okay? So Warner from 2019 onwards, including today's match, is running at a 15.5 boundary percentage. That's a below average boundary percentage for a T20 batter. When you're an opening batsman, an overseas opening batsman, captain of your team, and have the reputation to be one of the best players in the tournament, that is not good. Now, he's also got a strike rate of about 129 against pace, 146 against spin. So whereas we've advocated Kohli opening the batting for RCB based on his preference of pace, I actually think we could make the opposite argument for Warner, and he should go like 3 or 4, and you could probably switch Manish Pandey with Warner and be quite happy about it. And I think that he's regressed as a player in terms of he's not fearful anymore because he's not a boundary hitter. His boundary hitting numbers are below average. He used to be so good. I remember him 4 or 5 years ago. Like, he could destroy teams, and now he's a below average hitter. It's a shame. Maybe it's age when he's 34 now, and maybe that time does come for everyone. But cricket has this kind of propensity to overvalue old players. And I think if football was cricket, Michael Owen, David Beckham, and Wayne Rooney would still be playing in the IPL. Or the way that the IPL teams favour old players. But the other point I wanted to make about Warner's innings is that he faced almost half the balls in the SRH innings. He only hit 22 dots, and SRH as a team only had 36 dots. Right, the 36 dots is pretty low. And I'm thinking to myself, again, but dots mean nothing. It's boundaries. And the whole of the Sunrisers team had the same amount of boundaries as Gaikwad and Plessis between them. That was the biggest problem. And you can talk about Warner saying, his timing was off and blah, 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 blah. Well, try playing an aerial shot once in a blue moon. Try actually trying to hit sixes. Like, all these cross-batted shots into the ground is just a load of rubbish. There's no intent there at all. It's too responsible. He's caught between this like rock and a hard place of trying to attack and then trying to see the innings through. You can't do both. No player, unless you're AB de Villiers, can do both. It is impossible. So just give up on it. Play your natural game, and if it's not good enough, then your team recruited badly. And I think we can all agree that happened. So.
I think we can get onto that in a moment. I'm really glad you've touched on a couple of points there, both David Warner's regression and the way he batted today. So I don't know about you two, but my sort of personal barometer at a really headline level for whether a top order batter is excellent or not is if they're scoring runs and they're maintaining a strike rate over 150. So just as like a basic check, that's what I look for when I look through stats, basically, when I fancy nerding out. Warner has had 3 seasons like that in the IPL. The last one was 5 years ago, as you said, Dan, in 2016. I'm going to go out on a limb, and I don't think that he's capable of producing that type of cricket anymore. And I think there's a few reasons for that. I think, first of all, I think he might genuinely just be a bit selfish. To bat in a slightly more reckless manner and possibly sacrifice, or to possibly leave some runs out there when I think it's probably fair to say he's carrying around a pretty big ego and thinks he's the best player on the team. I don't think whether he necessarily has the capacity to do that. I think on top of that, I'm not 100% sure he understands how you're supposed to play cricket in T20 cricket. I actually think he might need someone to sit down with him and explain sort of what you're talking about, Dan, in terms of how boundary percentages is really what you should be striving for and not limiting the number of dot balls. And that might sound ridiculous, but there are plenty of examples in other sports where people who have excelled at the sport haven't grasped the fundamentals of why they are being successful. And I think beyond that, on a technical level, there are a couple of problems with how Dave Warner bats, and people know about them. He is struggling more and more as he gets older against bowlers who can move the ball away from him consistently, particularly at pace. So that stat you mentioned about strike rate, Dan, I think is quite revealing there, because you can see there's a reasonably significant differential in terms of how he scores against pace bowling and how he scores against spin bowling. And I think the cat's out the bag to some extent on that. We've seen Jofra Archer knock over his off stump so many times in different formats. Broad, I know it's Test cricket, but they're both, the two of them are providing a little bit of a format for how to bowl to a guy who is going to play with a technique that is kind of Test crickety in T20 cricket. And it's just leading, or it has led, in my mind, to a regression that's probably not reversible for Warner. And I think the other point you make, and Max, maybe you want to speak about a little bit about this because you've been quiet for a while now, was that the shots he did play today. I don't recall, off the top of my head, a single piece of improvisation. I don't know if you did, Max, or...
Yes, I recall one piece of improvisation. It was my favourite moment of the entire game when he tried to step across and do a paddle over his shoulder and just fell over. It was absolutely brilliant. He just ended up in a heap, and you could hear him sort of grimace as he went down and just sort of like go ah as he crumpled to the floor. But that was the one bit that that I saw, and he said at the end of the game that he admitted that he was terrible, which is a good step. Right, he realised he batted too slowly. It would be pretty difficult not to realise that, but he did at least come out and say it. He touched on another point that could have benefited the team, which was maybe he should have kicked his stumps over. But more seriously, he was blaming it on hitting the fielders, and that is really kind of the point, isn't it, that Dan made? Like, why are you hitting the fielders? That is your fault. Not like, I just happened. He said, I kept hitting it straight to the fielders. There was nothing I could do about it. It's like, well, there is 100% something you can do about it, and that is think about where the field is, think about the shots you're going to play, add some invention, like you say, Jack, and I was also, like you said, Dan, try and go over the fielders because he definitely can do that. And there were some shots that he did time straight to the fielders. So if you time it over the fielders, then you don't have to worry about them. It was a really bizarre innings, and the commentators talked a lot about how he looked frustrated. He was trying, but he wasn't, was he? He wasn't trying enough, and he wasn't doing the right things. And I think that goes back to what you say, Jack, about not really getting what he needs to do.
Yeah, I think maybe the next innovation. It's interesting that he talked about hitting to the fielders, and Dan, it's interesting that you mentioned, effectively, him not hitting the ball in the air enough. I reckon one of the next innovations that will happen in T20 cricket, and Dan, we spoke about this off air, is people improving their launch angle when they hit the ball, and what I mean by that is it's them hitting the ball up better. With changing their technique slightly so that when you cover drive the ball, for instance, you don't do it like Warner, or you don't do it like Shubman Gill, I think was the player me and Dan were talking about. You do it like Sanju Samson. So you extend through it, and the ball goes up at 30 degrees.
You almost lean back a bit.
yeah, you've got a chance at a 4 or a 6. And I don't know how significant building changes like that to a batter's technique will be, but I'm pretty sure that how consistently batters are able to hit the ball in the air will be one of the next innovations that we see on TV broadcasts. And I think that probably happens in the nets and stuff and with coaching. But I think that's where the game's heading. And Warner, I think, effectively has sort of been left behind, is what we're all saying. We do have a couple of super chats. One from Vic, who talks about age, saying Shikhar Dhawan's 35, AB de Villiers is 37, 34 should be prime. I think age is different for different players and different styles of play. And I think it's possible that age has caught up with Warner quicker than the other two. And I think the other two as well have reinvented their games a little bit. Shikhar Dhawan plays cricket different now to how he did in the past. And so does Faf du Plessis. I'm not the biggest buyer of Faf du Plessis. I don't love him. But he's a capable opener. I'm not going to say he shouldn't have an IPL contract. And, I'm not going to say that about Warner either. But, we think of Warner as one of the great, if not the greatest, T20 opening batter. I mean, Gale's probably ahead of him, isn't he? And today was ugly. I mean, that cricket stat, 15th worst out of 9,724 innings.
Yeah, I saw another stat that said that his innings had a minus 2% impact on the win probability for
-2. Stick a 0 at the end of that.
Yeah, but I mean to come out with that, to score 57 and have a negative impact on your team as chances of winning the game kind of says it all, doesn't it?
Yeah, and Jack, you talk about David Warner like you're not going to turn around and say that he shouldn't get an IPL contract next time out in the mega auction, right? We can do what I call the Steve Smith test on Warner right now, okay? If you get his numbers from 2019 onwards and you don't know who that player is, he's just called Player X, I'm not sure you would give him a contract, especially as an overseas player.
I think, right, so there's a few things.
If you didn't know if it was Warner,
I wouldn't be paying him 12 crore. I'd be paying him a lot less than 12 crore. There's going to be an expansion next year, and I think just the raw volume of runs will be attractive to some teams. As
he'll get a contract, but I'm saying, maybe he shouldn't.
I mean, he wouldn't be my first choice, but, if you need a backup anchor, I think he's better than like Steve Smith still. Should we move on from Warner? I've had, there's one last thing I'd want to say on Warner because I thought this was really funny. Within an hour of him being out, there were 26.2 thousand tweets. Basically, I didn't read them all, obviously, but the general theme being David Warner is absolutely abysmal. Heisenberg, I think, came up with the best theory about why this innings may have happened, and he said David Warner is just teaching a life lesson to Manish Pandey on how frustrating it is to watch him bat like this.
Good to see Walter White's alter ego get involved with it.
Kind of worked, didn't it? Manish Pandey did all right.
Yeah. Saurav, we're going to get to your super chat just in a little bit, but it's about when we talk about Royal Challengers Bangalore. Let's just finish off the first bit of this game, though. Williamson and Kedar Jadhav. I think we said Williamson's got a pretty good strike rate at the death, Dan. Kedar Jadhav doesn't, but he managed to, hit 12 from 3 balls. A pretty decent contribution for him.
Yeah, well, we spoke about Williamson, I think, on the last pod, didn't we, about how he's actually got a pretty good strike rate at the death for someone who's probably a little bit more conservative than most. But he's an excellent player. He's very adaptable, and he showed that again here. Of course, there's the obvious argument they should have been batting about 10 overs before he actually came in. And Kedar Jadhav, what can you say about him? Now, from 2019 onwards, he's got a strike rate of 84 at the death, as opposed to about 60 before. So he's managed to improve that very, very slightly. My thoughts of whether a 36-year-old Kedar Jadhav can actually break the 120 barrier at the death by the end of this season is certainly up for debate.
Williamson was good. I think... we were talking about how much they're paying people. Kane Williamson gets paid about a quarter of what Manish Pandey and Dave Warner get paid. And he has to come in every time he comes in, it's a completely different scenario that he's being asked. It's, this week you're rebuilding the innings. This week you're the anchor. This week you're coming in for the 10 balls at the death to try and hit as many sixes as possible. And he always seems to deliver something. So if I were him, I'd be asking for a pay rise. You know, or at least for Dave Warner and Manish Pandey to pick up the bar tab at the end of the tournament.
You're very rarely looking at a Sunrisers game and going, "Oh, what was Kane Williamson doing there?" Aren't you? Like he is Mr. Reliable, and must be quite frustrated.
Yeah, I would be if I were him. Let's talk about Sunrisers Hyderabad on the bowling side, because it took them a long time to pick up a wicket, Max. Their two best bowlers are gone. Teams can go back to just blocking out Rashid Khan. We speculated he might win the purple cap, the wicket one.
You're getting there.
If he had some bowlers to back him up so that people couldn't just play him out. But we're back to that. Like, people are like, I mean, today they actually played some shots, but they didn't need to.
They'd won the game by then.
What does that mean for our prediction that Rashid Khan will win the purple cap? And two, if Sunrisers Hyderabad's game plan is to rely on their bowling, how screwed are they right now?
Well, our theory the theory we had about why he would win the purple cap is no longer tenable, because he has no support whatsoever around him. Like, it was last year, it was a bit bad. This year is even worse now, isn't it? Like, they've got nothing really to back him up, and it is going to be a case of, we will see Rashid Khan come on probably in the 7th over, because they need something to try and change the game. He'll probably go at 7 and over, maybe pick up a wicket or two. He did well to pick up 3 today, with some lovely bowling at the end. But like I said, by that point the game was gone. So he's going to be the Kane Williamson of the bowling attack, I think, and just be looking around him and going, "What is this? What is this rubbish?" And I've forgotten what your second question was.
I think you kind of answered both. To be honest, it was one about Rashid Khan and one about Sunrisers Hyderabad's bowling prospects, for how it will affect their game plan and badly.
I mean, they're stuffed. They are absolutely stuffed. I mean, I genuinely see no hope for them whatsoever at this point.
Yeah. Right, so I have 2 more talking points on this, unless anyone else wants to add anything in. We've got Chennai Super Kings, and I think we've talked a lot about Sunrisers, and quite often on this show we do, go in heavy on the negativity and fail to dole out the praise. So I think we should apportion some praise to Chennai Super Kings. Do we want to do that first, or do we want to talk about how Sunrisers Hyderabad's recruitment policy is so terrible? Max, you can be the arbiter.
Let's start. Let's get some good stuff in, because we have been a little negative for thus far.
Chennai Super Kings is all coming down really rather nicely for them, isn't it? We predicted before the tournament that they might struggle, and we actually predicted that Sunrisers Hyderabad wouldn't struggle, and that they would be not a banker team to make the playoffs, but we thought they would. Complete role reversal, and actually, probably to my surprise, it's sort of their bowling up front that's leading this charge. Max, off the top of your head, this is good. This is a tough one. How many balls per wicket are they bowling in the power play at the moment? What's their strike rate in the power play?
14.
It's 13. That was a really good guess, Max. I can tell you're a big fan. We have to say, I didn't see this coming. I didn't think that Deepak Chahar would roll back the year, so to speak, and bowl like this, Dan. I mean, I don't know. Was there anything in the numbers that suggested that they might be as dangerous up front?
I like Chahar as a power play bowler. He's pretty much you could just go straight through with Chahar.
He is a specialist power play bowler.
Yeah, I actually really like him. I don't think the tracks in the UAE last year were to his favour, but he's got a pretty good track record in India of going pretty well in the power play. Sam Curran's kind of backed him up a little bit. The one big issue for them at the moment is Shardul Thakur, who is I mean, his numbers aren't good.
And his over to Kane Williamson was as much
to do positivity, and it lasted one player.
It was a bad over though, wasn't it?
Oh, I don't really get him. We talked about players before that we don't get, and he's one of them.
Yeah, I'm kind of in that camp as well. But on top of Deepak Chahar, we've seen Ravi Jadeja, after his sort of long injury break, come back in, and he was pretty phenomenal again. First ball of the match today, Dave Warner took on Jadeja and got away with it. How many times out of 10 do you reckon they get away with that, Max?
Well, I think you'd have to extend the scale a bit. On 0.2.
Yeah, he's been phenomenal with both bat and ball.
Hands.
Yeah, and actually, maybe a bit of a surprise package. Not a surprise package, because he was okay last year, but I think Ruturaj Gaikwad has shown a little bit more dynamism this year. So in our preview, I think we said he didn't hit enough boundaries, but I think in at least a couple of the games, Dana, maybe you can corroborate this, he has looked a little bit more explosive and punchy than we thought he would be.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we spoke last year about him having the second lowest boundary count in the entire comp last year, behind, we say in front of Virat Kohli. But he's certainly kicked on in that area this year. I mean, he had 12 fours in 44 balls today, which is 27% boundaries. And incidentally, that's actually triple David Warner's boundary percentage for the match. So nicely segs into that, maybe.
And then I guess the final question is: are Chennai sort of nailed on at this point, Max, for the playoffs, or are you worried that things like a really high strike rate in the power play might not be sustainable, and that they'll surrender a little bit of the momentum that they've got at the moment?
I think they're pretty close. I wouldn't say nailed on by any stretch, because you never know what might happen. But I think they're as close as they can be to being very very comfortable. I think what has happened is you look at the teams they've played. Obviously, the win against RCB was a surprise and really really excellent. But aside from that, they lost to the Delhi Capitals, but they've beaten Sunrisers, who are like dreadful, as we've seen, and then KKR and Rajasthan Royals and Punjab Kings, who all showed the worst of what they have to offer this year in those particular games. So there is a little bit of gloss on it from that perspective, and it'll be interesting to see what happens when they come up against Mumbai, and see if they can keep that running. But they do all still have to play all the terrible teams again. So I think they'll have enough to get the extra 3 wins that's probably needed to get through. And I mean, in terms of whether they can keep it up, the batting order is looking solid, and I think it's when you've Deepak Chahar is basically, he's in the side to kind of do that, isn't he? Have a high strike rate in the power play. So if he's performing well, then I'd say absolutely that's a sustainable thing. It's just whether he can keep the level up.
There we go. I should mention we've had a really nice sticker from Swadheen in the live chat of a fox which is writing number 1 on a piece of paper. So thank you very much for that super chat. Let's talk about Sunrisers recruitment, because there was a big debate on Twitter today between people who think that Sunrisers Hyderabad have recruited badly. I think that probably includes all 3 of us. And people who think that they maybe have the players and are trying the wrong tactics, or there's just some bad juju in the room at the moment, and that is contributing to them failing. Dan, do you want to talk about this in a little bit more detail? Because I saw you got into a right ding dong with somebody.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't know if you guys have been a bit of a fan of Blackadder in the past, but there was an episode where Captain Redbeard Rum said he was going to sail around the Cape of Good Hope, and they said that someone said, is it too dangerous to go there? And he said, well, there are 2 schools of thought: everyone else's and mine. And I think that was basically, you could say the same thing for those Sunrisers apologists today. Everyone else has got the same school of thought apart from you. So it was, I mean, I just don't get it. Okay, it's like you have Bairstow, Williamson, and Rashid Khan in the same team. Okay, like Rashid Khan is like Messi. You could say like Bairstow, Williamson, like Harry Kane and Bruno Fernandes. So you got 3 like real top players, one absolute like marquee no better player than. And he basically got a load of League One players to shove with him and go, go and beat Man City, can you? It's just not going to happen. Like, honestly, I talk a lot about that, this domestic core of play. A good team has a good domestic core. Do Sunrisers have a good domestic core? Absolutely not.
No, I mean, on the bowling side, they got Bhuvi and Natarajan.
We said before the tournament with Bhuvi, the big caveat about their success was whether he stayed fit.
Yeah, and he hasn't.
And he hasn't, and he didn't last year either. So putting all of your faith in one domestic bowler is like, it's crazy.
I agree massively with you, Dan. So I think going back to the 2018 mega auction? I think it was 2018. The decision to spend 11 crore on Manish Pandey is bizarre. At that point, you can kind of forgive them Warner. I think they thought he was a banker, and it's not quite turned out that way. So the decision to spend that much money on a player who isn't very good, if we're being honest, or maybe should be a role player, was strange. But then in following auctions, here are just some of the players that they have missed out on. So Rahul Tripathi, Tiwari probably could have done a job in a couple of years. Shahrukh Khan this year, Azharuddin, Patidar, Gaikwad, Padakal, Jaiswal. What baffles me is that they haven't, once this hole in their batting order effectively has been identified, that they haven't really aggressively recruited to try and fill it. Is that right, Dan?
Yeah, because they had. I mean, like if you go through all of their stats, say from like 2017 onwards, right? They have this common denominator that they are one of, if not the worst, death hitters in the league. Okay, this is not rocket science. Okay, so you would think that the think tank, whoever's making these decisions, because there seems to be a bit of debate about that in some quarters at the moment as well, who you would identify the gaps and then address those gaps, right? Go into auction and think, okay, well, we need a finisher. How about we, I don't know, bid on Shahrukh Khan or whoever, yeah? There's other options, of course, too. And they go, nah, we'll get Kid Oyad having shut the laptop. and two spinners. I mean, like, what? It's just mind blowing. And if there's me who can sit at home in a home office knowing that boundary percentage wins you winning the boundary percentage in the match, it wins you 85% of matches. And I'm sitting there in a home office in the north of England, not being able to do anything about this because these people running these teams just, in my opinion, just don't have a clue. I mean, look, I've got a RCB face mask on my head as a bandana, and I still think I could do a better job running them teams than actual people do.
Right, I think that's a great place to leave Sunrisers until the next time, and hopefully in their next game we can just breeze through their next defeat. Max, yesterday was a great game, an absolute, it was maybe the game of the tournament so far. Royal Challengers Bangalore v Delhi Capitals. What happened?
Yeah, so second v third place yesterday, and the thus far impressive RCB and Delhi Capitals did battle in Ahmedabad. We had been hoping maybe for some closer results after a few games where it had all been a bit of a damp squib and one side had run away with it, but not so yesterday. Batting first were RCB, and against some good power play bowling from Avesh Khan and Ishant, they got off to a bit of a sticky start, and runs didn't come especially freely despite Patidar's 31 off 22, which, as we have recently mentioned, might be quite welcome in the Sunrisers top order. But after this fairly sticky start, not for the first time in this tournament, a man called AB de Villiers strode to the crease, and he appeared to be operating in a completely different universe to absolutely everyone else in the whole of the province, and he just smashed 75 or 42 to probably take RCB from what was slightly below par to slightly above par, all on his own, because he is just a freak. Delhi Capitals innings took on quite a similar form, really. Not much fluency up top. Rishabh Pant, in particular, really struggled to find the boundary in his 58-run innings, and all hope pretty much looked lost after about 13, 14 overs until Shimron Hetmyer turned up, and he reprised the role of AB, maybe even a bit better. firing rockets all over the place and took DC to within spitting distance. So it would have been a pretty miraculous win at the time. But with 14 needed off the final over and 6 off the final ball, Rishabh Pant couldn't quite clear the rope. And Siraj and RCB held on for a nerve-jangling one-run win.
Where do we want to start with this one then, Max, in terms of questions and talking points?
I think there's only one place we can start, really, and that's got to be AB de Villiers. He is, well, you said it, he's 37, and he basically only really plays T20 cricket now, maybe the odd T10, just has a bit of hit and giggle, and he just seems to be maturing with age, like a fine wine. Like a fine South African wine, and it's stunning, really, isn't it? How well he's done so far. He's basically carried RCB in multiple games this season in the batting order. So I would like to know how you stop him in this kind of form. Is there anything that people can do to stop AB just dismantling their bowling attacks?
I'm going to pass on that one, Dan.
No, you just have to watch and enjoy it, or as much as you can enjoy it as an opposition team. This guy is on another planet. He is, without a doubt, the best T20 batsman in the world, and it's not even close. So I look at two metrics as massively important when you're looking at assessing a T20 batsman: boundary percentage versus balls per dismissal, right? And the ideal player would be in a top right-hand corner, which is high boundary percentage and high balls per dismissal. And it's very, very rare to find players in that top right-hand corner, because usually balls per dismissal is traded off with boundary hitting, because you can't usually you do one or the other. You're an anchor or you're a hitter. He does both. He's like the only player in that top right-hand corner in pretty much every tournament that he plays in. The guy is unbelievable. Like, he's 37 years old. We talk about players in decline. He's clearly not in decline. This is a player who has it all, and he's going. In my view, he should go down as arguably the great T20 player of the last decade.
He's also now doing it keeping wicket, which is I expected RCB to maybe play Azruddin and have someone actually keeping wicket and allow AB just to sort of trot around at short fine leg or something. But he's also now behind the stumps and doing all this, so it's extra impressive.
Yes, it is. Beyond that, because he was given the chance to shine a little bit by what I think was some questionable captaincy from Rishabh Pant.
Yes.
Who decided that he was going to give a one-over spell to Marcus Stoinis in the 20th over of the IPL match with de Villiers on strike.
And set and batting really well.
Yeah. So it's interesting that this ended up happening in the first place, to be honest, because I think at the time the decision was basically between Amit Mishra and Stoinis. Now, Mishra, I don't know whether either of those two options are exactly what I'd want for the 20th over of the game. My question, Matt, is sort of how did this happen?
I genuinely think he must have got his numbers wrong and got the bowling got the overs wrong, because I can't possibly understand why you would let that happen. Like, even you've got other like Axel Patel did bowled the super over the other game, so he would have been an option. Kahisa Rabada obviously bowls a lot at the death and picks up wickets there. He would have been an option, and Avesh Khan was bowling really well, and he would have been an option. But I don't. He had better options, and he bowled them all out. And surely he knew. I think because Rabada bowled his fourth over in the 18th he bowled, and you're just sort of, when that happened, you're looking at it thinking, well, what? That can't be right. What's happened there? No,
maybe he thought it was an E18. It was strange. I've long thought the Delhi Capitals slightly overvalue or majorly overvalue Marcus Stoinis. They seem to think that he is Shane Watson when he isn't. He is.
No, he'd never review a Plum LBW.
No, well, he's Marcus Stoinis. He's a kind of an average middle order batter, which isn't necessarily bad because most people can't be average. But he sort of fills the role as a middle order batter, and he's a pretty sub-average bowler. I can't believe that the highest leverage moment in this entire cricket match was bowled by Marcus Stoinis. It absolutely, positively baffles me that this was able to happen. I actually looked into this because I thought this can't be right. Like there must have been some thought behind this. Apparently, he has bowled the 20th over in a game 9 times before, and previously he has an okay record. The worst he's ever bowled was an over that went for 12.
In those games, had he bowled overs before in the game?
I've no idea, but I think sort of beyond that, it's such a misread of the situation from Rishabh Pant. Even if that was part of the plan and they knew that Stoinis could bowl that over, as soon as it's de Villiers in, you need to change your plan. You can't. It's like a lamb to the slaughter, wasn't it? It was Rishabh Pant, Mrs. Shepherd, waving the lamb through to the de Villiers abattoir. It really completely blew my mind. And then later in the game, Rishabh Pant's batting was sort of bizarre as well. Max, he played a bit of a match-losing innings, if we're being honest. Do you think that was because his mind was on the massive error he'd made as captain, or do you just think it was one of those days?
I would say the latter. I think it's not the first time it's happened. We saw it for most of the last IPL in the UAE that Rishabh Pant wasn't his normal self. He wasn't fluent and wasn't really striking the ball properly. And I think we saw him on one of those days yesterday. And even then, it wasn't beyond the reach, thanks to the brilliance of Hetmyer, but it was, you just think you're crying out there, aren't you, for just a couple of extra balls to have a go at, and it could have been a different story. Well, I was surprised on Stoinis because they'd recently seemed to have carved out a little niche for him to bowl an over or two in the first power play, and actually he was doing that quite well with a little bit of nibble early up with the ball doing things for the 2 overs that it does, and that gives you the freedom and sort of the leeway at the end to actually pick someone that you might want to bowl a closing over if de Villiers is striking the ball over the place. So that was another strange bit of captaincy from me, I thought. So I'm a little downcast about Rishabh Pant's captaincy thus far, but I don't think that is why the batting struggled.
Yeah. Dan, one for you, because someone has pointed out that it's like I've forgotten you're on the podcast, so I'm sorry that if I've left you in the corner for too long. They only lost by 1 run, the Capitals, and that was basically because Shimron Hetmyer had maybe the game of his IPL career. Yeah. Do you want to talk us through that a little bit, whether it was expected, whether we should expect it again in the future?
Okay, so Shimron Hetmyer is a player who I think is really quite fair to say at the IPL level at least is flatter to deceive in recent years. I was pretty vocal about the fact that Hetmyer is not worth 7.75 crore in a market which didn't particularly value overseas batsmen at the last mini auction. And
I think if Manish Pandey's worth 11.
Oh well, yeah.
That's a steal.
I think that they could have released him and bought him back cheaper, and I still stand by that. But a lot of people on Twitter, there are people on Twitter who are pretty, ardent watchers of cricket, and they maintain that Shimron Hetmyer is this like gun batsman waiting to happen. And I guess yesterday was the first sign that actually could manifest itself. And maybe that's a breakthrough innings for him. Whether he's number 6, I'm not entirely convinced. I think he should be batting a bit higher up than that. But he couldn't have done much more to try and get Delhi over the line, could he?
No, I probably. So I've seen these people, and it's almost a meme that Shimron Hetmyer is a good cricketer. I can't see any real evidence that he is. Now, I fully understand that I'm saying this after he scored 53 off 26 balls or something ridiculous like that, and almost, pulled off the biggest burglary of the IPL so far. But I think this is just sort of an example of what he could in theory be, and I don't think he'll ever get there. I just don't think that he has the game overall. I think a lot of the balls that he ended up hitting for six were basically, pretty poor deliveries. But he'll have done enough today to justify someone spending 5 crore on him at the next year auction, so it'll be good for his bank balance. I mean, in a little bit more detail, I think in the last 2 years, his strike rate is below 130 across all T20s he's played. And that is pretty average for a guy batting 4, 5 or 6, I think. And by pretty average, I don't mean average in terms of like Marcus Stoiner's average enough to get a game. I mean average in the way Australians say.
Sense.
Yeah, that's pretty average. And he averages about 20 with his actual average. I think, and look, he might prove me wrong. Dan, maybe you're right. This could be the dawning of the era of Shimron, but I think he's the batting version of Tom Curran, in that he is capable, because he has obvious significant athletic gifts, of doing amazing things, just like Tom Curran does occasionally do amazing things. But you saw the pair of them, they're useless 8 out of 10 times they step onto the cricket field, or worse than useless sometimes. And I do think it's quite interesting that Delhi have ended up with the Tom Curran of the batting world, the Tom Curran of the bowling world, and also sort of the Tom Curran of the top order batting world in Steve Smith. But they've done? They've won 4 out of 6 matches, so something's going quite well for them. Max, anything?
They're in a league of 8 teams where most teams are really bad. That's why they're third.
Max, do you want to say anything positive about Delhi, or should we move on to another point?
Delhi.
I mean, pretty sure that's positive.
Yeah. Well, it is what it is, but then again, his 21 did come off 18 balls, so it wasn't that positive. I think it started very well, and then kind of ground to a halt, and then he got out. So maybe not as positive as it looked at first. But I mean, I think I mentioned last time that he over the course of the IPL this year, he's looked much more the Prithvi Shaw that we thought he was. I do actually have a bit of praise for the Delhi Capitals, and that's for Avesh Khan, who I think has sort of gone under the radar a bit in terms of how well he's performed this year. He's not. Well, he's still a little way off, but he's sort of he's got Harshal Patel in his sight in the long distance run for the purple cap, and he again had a really good game. He was key in the game against Sunrisers, and again yesterday, bowled really well in the power play and in the middle, with only going for 24, and he's been really important for Delhi Capitals, and actually providing a bit of I guess structure and a bit more balance to their bowling attack. I think it means that they don't have to bowl Stoinis as much.
So there's some good points for Delhi. I mean, I might think that some of their selections are bad, but they've actually been decent, better than I thought. I think Amit Mishra you can add to the list of positives as well. I wrote him off as like some kind of old man, or probably older than what's older than an old man, dinosaur. And he's shown that he still has quite a lot of worth. So I think they're on the right side. We did have a super chat in from Human Being who just wanted to say thanks, basically. So thank you very much for that. And we had
didn't we have one earlier as well?
Much earlier, yes. Surav from sent us this. So RCB fan here from the City of Angels. Patadar looked decent last night, but do you think bringing Finn Allen in at 3? And ignoring Sam's/Christian might be the way forward. So Dan, you're just about the biggest Finn Allen fan I've ever heard. Yeah. Do you want to talk about Finn Allen and why he'd be good for RCB?
Yeah, let's do it. Finn Allen, well, he's traditionally more of an opener than a 3, but yeah, I think that there was a couple of games earlier on in the tournament where RCB only went with 3 overseas and they picked Patadar as opposed to Finn Allen, which I thought was nuts. Patadar looks a good player, but Finn Allen literally could be anything he wants to be. Like, his numbers are beyond incredible. The 6 hitting percentage, the boundary percentage, the strike rate, which obviously goes hand in hand with that. From that one season in New Zealand, you just don't see anyone with those numbers, let alone like a 20, 21-year-old. So the potential's massive. Don't Yeah, I'm not a massive fan of like that Sam Stroke Christian type player who maybe doesn't bat that much, doesn't bowl a full quota. Or Sam's probably more likely to bowl a full quota than Christian. And on that subject of Sam's, we talk a lot about teams who maybe sometimes they win matches, but they have bad processes or they make bad decisions. And RCB batting Washington Sundar at 6 with about 5 overs to go over Sams or Jameson or Patel. It was bizarre. I don't understand. He's not a hitter at all. We can forget this notion that Washington Sundar is a hitter based on current evidence. And I said, I think I said on the pod on Monday, there's no point in playing Washington Sundar if you've got Maxwell, because Maxwell can bowl that serviceable off spin for matchups against left-handed batters on the opposition team, and then you can just structure up completely differently. So you with that, even you could go down, have Patador in the team and Finn Allen as well. So or as a Radin as a finisher or something like that. There's plenty of other options, and I just think that Sundar's 6 of 9 balls. I mean, how many times have we seen it already in this IPL and the last IPL? Someone in the RCB think tank has got a lot more faith in Washington Sundar's batting than the numbers, or probably any of us think that we have, basically.
Yeah. Right, we've got a little bit of time. Should we do some quick previews? And then if there are any questions anyone has, we'll do 1 or 2 questions after that. We want to keep this to an hour because these review shows are getting longer and longer. And it's already...
I'm sorry to break it to you. There's a double header tomorrow, so...
Yeah, I know. Well, yeah. Right, so tomorrow, Mumbai Indians v Rajasthan Royals. I just want to know, in a couple of sentences, who you think will win and why. Max?
I've got to go for the Mumbai Indians. That's the obvious choice, and I think they will be keen to get back on track and notch up another win after a couple of defeats. And I think Rajasthan Royals are the perfect opposition to allow them to do that.
Dan, what do you reckon?
Yeah, well, Mumbai, I mean, if they don't win this, then they may as well just quit the tournament because, they finally got themselves away from Jaipur, which they'll be delighted about. Yeah. I mean, like, Rajasthan, if you've got a team who have got just a complete imbalance between their overseas and domestic players, and then half their overseas players pull out, they're basically screwed. So, if Mumbai don't win this, I'll be amazed.
Yeah, but they might. Is Rassi van der Dussen out of quarantine yet? Because he could be the difference.
I don't think he will be.
Let's move on to the late game tomorrow then. So that's Delhi Capitals v Kolkata Knight Riders. So we've talked about Delhi and why things might not all be perfect there, but they're certainly not perfect with KKR as well either, are they, Max? I mean, on paper, I think this is probably a Delhi win as the more competent cricket side of the two.
I think so. I think actually KKR are probably the team that have enraged me most so far this IPL.
They do every flipping IPL. I look at their team sheet and I'm like, Dre Russ, I'll have a bit of that. Pat Cummins, I'll have a bit of that. You've got Sunil Narayan's mystery spin, Lockie Ferguson, the genius of Owen Morgan. And every IPL, it's like, people are back with their bat upside down. Like it.
Yeah, I don't really have much more to add on that. I think you've basically summed KKR up quite nicely. They are a team of disappointments at the moment. So fully behind the Delhi Capitals for that one.
Do you think their families think they're disappointments as well, or are they just happy that they've got a gig?
I think someone's got to love them. Someone's got to love them.
I don't know. I think my dad would be disappointed with the performances of if I were.
I think
Sunil
Narayan's dad's actually the one who's been calling in his action for question.
Dan, do you have any a counterpoint maybe there? Is there reason to be hopeful for KKR?
Yes.
Oh.
There is a reason why I'm hopeful for KKR, and that's because I want Delhi to win really badly. So they're probably KKR are going to win.
Nice.
That was in the hunt.
Yeah.
Classic. And then the final match before our next show, which will be Friday. We're going to be back on Friday. I think Daniel Norcross is going to be joining us, Max, which will be good. Is Punjab Kings v Royal Challengers Bangalore. Punjab, someone wanted us to talk about them in the chat. So we talked about RCB a lot today. I think RCB will win this game. But once again, Dan, your desires aside, is there anything coming out of Punjab that's suggesting they could do something here?
Not really. I mean, like we spoke about Punjab. I think Jack, we were quite on the same page before the tournament of thinking that they could be dark horses if they made good decisions with their team, and I think that it's pretty fair to say that they haven't made good decisions.
Yeah, it's actually quite sad. It's not
it's
disappointing.
Really sad.
It's like
massively, yeah. So yeah, I don't like the way that they're structuring up at all. KL Rahul is back to his ball-eating best, as Ross might say. I'm sure he's sitting in Cornwall, enjoying his holiday, watching the IPL, and looking forward to some more ball-eating antics, perhaps on Friday. But yeah, I just can't see past my boys RCB as well. So we're going to go with them.
Fair enough, Max. Any thoughts?
I think we've all gone with the form book so far, so I'll be the hipster on this one and say that something bizarre will happen. Maybe Mohammad Shami will just take a hat trick in the power play and Punjab will run away with it.
I thought you were going to say Isham Perel was going to play.
They might recall Jai Richardson.
Yeah, they should do both.
We have a couple of chats to finish us off them, and we'll do sort of one each. So Raghu has asked, well, he's basically said to us, Max, I find it very odd that you guys are picking on Dave Warner for today's innings. Do you trust SRH's middle order like Jadav and Shankar to strike at above 150? What do you say to that, Max?
Yeah, well, no, there is a point there, actually, that David Warner probably does have in the back of his mind that beneath him is a load of absolute rubbish, and probably thinks that if they are going to win, he sort of needs to bat for quite a lot of the overs. I think the same is true for Johnny Bairstow, and the same is true, obviously, for Kane Williamson. So there may be something there in the back of his mind that actually is, means that he doesn't try the innovative and doesn't try to hit the sixes, because obviously the risk of getting out is higher. So possibly true, but you kind of you can't really go into a game thinking like that, because we've said before, like, if you bat really slowly and end up getting a subpar score, you're probably just as unlikely to win the game as if you go all out from the top and then fizzle out and get 90. Like, you might as well go for it and try and get a score that will win you the game, because a score that won't win you the game is still 9 times out of 10 not going to win you the game. So there is, that you just kind of have to get over that fact. But also, he has a really, really bad moustache, and he's a really bad guy. So there's also that.
I think, Max, you sort of got to the point I'd make right at the end there, and
he's got a bad moustache.
Basically, if you're the best player in the team, like David Warner thinks he is, and you're opening the batting, or you're KL Rahul, same for Punjab Kings, your job is to score more runs than you should per ball face. You need to outperform. You can't be the guy making it hard for everyone else, and that's what infuriates us about KL Rahul, is that people say, oh, he bats slow for the sake of the team, but that's he bats slow, and it makes the rest of everyone else on the team has to try harder. Yeah. Like, it's the guys not as good as him are in trouble. Dan, there's one for you here, and this is basically to rank 4 players in order, and those 4 players are Devdutt Padikkal, Tom Banton, Josh Philippe, and Finn Allen. So one for the future of those 4 players. Let's at least have who's going to be number 1.
Oh my God, that is a toss-up.
That's Rishabh, by the way.
Devdutt Padikkal and Finn Allen will be fighting for number 1. They're very different types of players. Finn Allen's much more explosive. Padikkal's a bit more stable, but has that explosion as well, which we haven't always seen, but we are starting to see a lot more this year. So between those two, I think they've got massive careers ahead of them. Banton and Philippe are also very, very good players, but I think the other two are going to be a level above.
There we are. And then we've got one final super chat in from Rohit, who says, in these tough times, thanks for the IPL 21 and the Cricket Podcast Show for giving us some semblance of normality. We've not mentioned it, so we spoke about it at some length on the last show. We do appreciate that things are really tough in India, and a lot of our fans are based there. So, stay safe. I hope everything is well. And yeah, I mean, I think we echo some of those thoughts. It's in these times, it is nice to find things that are somewhat normal to get you through, and that's certainly how we've been living our lives here I've been living my life here for 14 months now, something like that. So yeah, thanks Rohit for that message. Finally, just to recap, you can find us over on Twitter at the Cricket Pod. Please hit subscribe. There are 315 people watching right now. I know you're not all subscribers because I have the stats. So you need to click the subscribe button. And if you want to go a little bit further than that, the option to donate directly to the show via YouTube by clicking join, or over on Patreon, which gives us a better deal, in the show notes, is available.
Don't need to line Google's pockets, do we?
Exactly. Dan, where can people find you? And then we'll wrap up the show.
Yeah, sure. You can check me out on Twitter at SA_Advantage, often tweeting about Sunrisers Hyderabad at the moment.
Cool. Thanks very much for listening, everyone. We will be back, as I said, on Friday. Dan, I think hopefully you can come back next week. We've got other Dan this Friday. Smoking Dan this Friday. Cheers, everyone. It's been another couple of good games in the IPL. Done.